Hello and welcome to Loopy's Place. Okay, we're not actually in the studio or in my own room today. We're in my office. We were just getting a quilt class prepared for members on the website to go with a quilt kit that I've put together. And one of the tips I was sharing, I thought, is a good one to share with everyone. So when we're making our quilts, quite often we'll add borders, great way of adding extra length or width. But especially if you're adding more than one, you can sometimes get an issue with the borders beginning to get wavy, which can cause issues when you're quilting, as well. You can quite often get tucks in it. Often if you manage to avoid it with the quilting, it can happen when you're adding the binding. So this, I'm going to put in the video that I've done on the class, and I hope that you'll find it useful. It's a great way to make sure that you don't have that issue. Drop a comment in below to let me know how you do your borders, if this is something that is useful for you. So without more ado, here's the answer to the question. Okay, so it's not relevant for what you're doing now, but it will be later on if you decide that you want to make a quilt on your own, and when it comes to measuring for borders. Now, I have done it both ways, and I've not had an issue with it. But the bigger your quilt gets, the more of an issue it can become, and I've seen photos of where it's become a big issue for people doing quilts with borders on, especially if you're doing multiple borders. Now, it all goes back to the way that fabric is made. It's woven, so you've got your warp and weft, and that means when we go to cut it and sew it and manipulate it in various ways, it moves. Now, it is so easy to think, I'll do a quilt, and maybe you want to make it bigger. So borders can be there for aesthetics. It can make it look nice, but it can also be there to add more of it if we need to just make it bigger to fit the bed that we want it for, or the table, or whatever. So easy to cut your strips and then sew it, press them open and trim them off. But you need to be careful, because sometimes that fabric in those quilts, it moves, and sometimes you end up, and you'll see it, where you've got waves in those borders, which then causes an issue when it comes to quilting and adding your binding. Now, I've admitted to doing it both ways, because quite often it's a matter of do what I tell you rather than do what I do. Experience will tell you when you can get away with it, but it teaches you how to avoid it. But we're human, and we all have this desire to get things finished, so we sometimes go for the easy option. So it's easier to make your strips, sew them off and cut them as you go. But we get these wavy borders. Now, to stop that from happening is that you measure your quilt. So you've got started putting your quilt together, you've got the centerpiece done, and now you're adding your borders. So when you're adding your side borders, you measure along the length, but you do it in about 3 places. So you go you measure it down the middle on either side, and you take the average of those measurements. What you'll then have to do is you mark the center of your quilt, and you cut your border to the size of that averaged measurement. You pin your ends on and you measure up the center of your border to the center of your quilt and ease the rest of the quilt in. And then that brings it back and brings your quilt back into that square. When you're doing the borders for the side, you're going to do the same again on the width, and then you're going to average it out. That's the measurement you're going to do, and then that's the way you do it. And that will prevent you getting a wavy edge on the side, which will then pucker when you come to quilting. And also, if you're not putting much quilting in, it will form tucks when you put in the binding on. So if you want to avoid that, you measure your quilt and put your border measurement to fit your quilt. In this case, all the pieces are pre-cut, so you don't have to worry about that. But this is also where having that consistent seam allowance comes in, because if you haven't, then you'll find that they may be too long. You have then my permission to trim them down to size. We all do it. Different machines will give us different measurements, and we're human, so it's not always going to be perfect every time. But don't beat yourself up about it. It's normal. If you've got any issues, do pop on. I'm quite happy to do a live video call so that you can show me what's happening or talk about the issues. So yes, that is your tip for moving on to other things later on. So I hope you find that useful, and I'll speak to you very soon.